Cletus and Clayton Dugan were as close as brothers, though they were cousins. They dropped out of middle school together, got in trouble together, and went to jail together. They lived in Trailer 71 on the backside of the Pink Flamingo's Trailer Park, drove shiny new Dodge Ram trucks, Cletus's red and Clayton's white, and considered themselves the best meth cooks in the state of Georgia. Neither could read very well, and thinking too much made their brains fuzzy, but Clayton's sister, Kelsey May, had graduated from Hitchcock High with a 2.0 GPA. Granted, it was only because she had threatened to start a rumor that Principal Snyder had propositioned her, which he had not, but it was still a smart move that helped her get her diploma. When Kelsey May found out that Cletus and Clayton had made up a batch of meth and were trying to sell it around town with zero success, she had taken over the operation. Kelsey May had watched the whole Breaking Bad series before her cable got shut off, and she had learned that the secret of Jesse's and Walter's success was badass marketing. First, they called their meth Blue Sky, and then Walter had created this mysterious figure of a drug lord by giving himself the street name of Heisenberg. He had chosen that name because of his admiration of the physicist of the same name. So, immediately after taking over the operation from Cletus and Clayton, Kelsey May employed the same strategy. She took her inspiration from her love of Dolly Parton. She gave herself the street name of Jolene and named their meth Hard Candy, both of which came from a couple of Dolly's more famous songs. When she had explained her marketing strategy, Clayton said, "I ain't so sure we should be calling our meth Hard Candy."
"Yeah,"
Cletus said. He was a skinny guy with a nervous smile that looked more like a lunatic twitch.
"I ain't so sure you should use Jolene as your drug dealer name neither."
"Why not?" she replied. Clayton looked at her like she had lost her mind. He removed his stained trucker hat from his head and nervously wiped at his brow. The front of the hat had the shadow outline of a fishhook and a naked woman. The text read, "Hookers or hooks, both better than work." "Well, 'cause we don't want to piss Dolly Parton off." When acting as Jolene, Kelsey May felt bolder, more confident, stronger, and she was not going to let anyone change her mind. "You two are stupid as hell." Cletus felt the need to come to his cousin's defense. He absent-mindedly scratched at the wiry beard he'd been trying to grow, which only made him look as if his face had the mange.
"You don't know, Kelsey May, Jolene. Dang it. Sure is hard to call you that now, but anyway, it could happen. If word got back to Dolly, she'd be real mad."
"And do what?" Jolene replied. Clayton gave a sheepish shrug of his beefy shoulders. "Well, I don't know. Maybe come after us." Jolene laughed so hard tears spilled from her eyes, and her stomach hurt. When she regained her composure, she said, "And what? Kick our asses with her wigs and her boobs?" Clayton and Cletus looked like two sad puppies who had been smacked with newspapers. But when they realized the idea that the world-famous Dolly Parton would come after them for using her song titles in their fledgling drug enterprise was ridiculous, they embraced the idea and ran with it. Sheriff Mosley kept the county pretty much drug-free, so Jolene decided to drive to Atlanta where the market for meth was better. It had been a wild success. In the last month alone, they had made over $100,000 selling hard candy to Atlanta's addicts. Emboldened, she started looking for ways to expand their operation, and on her most recent trip to Atlanta, in her own brand new Dodge Ram, black, with a 3-inch lift and all the bells and whistles, she'd gotten invited to a secret rave in an abandoned building. While there, she'd seen at least 1,000 partiers drinking liquor by the gallon and taking handfuls of drugs. She saw that they were also slurping down hundreds, if not thousands, of Jell-O shots. And that's when she had her next big idea. After slipping the bartender a $100 bill, she was introduced to the person in charge, a 30-year-old black Rastafarian witch named Jasmina. Jolene left the meeting with an order for 10,000 Jell-O shots, and on her way back to Nevermore Hollows, she came up with an idea for a potent recipe using moonshine that would guarantee a profitable relationship with Jasmina. When she did the math and realized it would take 666 cups of moonshine to make 10,000 Jell-O shots, a devilish smile sliced across her face. She stopped at a couple big-box grocery stores in Atlanta and bought all the cherry-flavored gelatin and 2-ounce containers she needed for the finished product. The next morning, she called Clayton and Cletus and told them to get their asses over to Lugosi Swamp, where Cletus's daddy had hidden his moonshine still, and load up 42 gallons of the stuff, which roughly equaled the 666 cups they'd need, and bring it over to the abandoned trailer that they used to cook up their hard candy. That was Trailer 99, and it had seen its best days 50 years ago. It sat on the south part of the lot and was covered in black mildew and green slime. The interior was mottled with mold that somehow resisted the harsh chemical fumes of the meth they cooked. But it was perfect for what they needed to do because it was far enough from the other trailers that no one noticed their operation. They were careful to keep their efforts away from the watchful eye of Ivan Ivanovich, the park's custodian, by always cooking after midnight and making sure they were cleared out before dawn. They gathered at the trailer just after 11 p.m., and when Jolene opened up the rusty steel drum containing the moonshine, she said, "What the hell is this?" Cletus stepped over and looked inside. He pushed his stained trucker cap back and said,
"Looks like a swamp rat."
Jolene glared at him. "I know what it looks like, fool. How did it get inside?" Clayton walked over and glanced at the rat floating in the shine. "So that's where that nasty bastard went." "What do you mean?" Jolene said, her patience with these two idiots running thin. "Well, after we poured the shine in this here drum, we seen this swamp rat digging in our bags of sugar and mash," Clayton said. "I was going to shoot the damn thing, but it done disappeared before I got my rifle from the truck." He glanced over at Cletus. "It was you who was supposed to be watching out for stuff like this. You was the one who let this critter done get inside the shine."
"Don't blame me for this,"
Cletus said.
"I was watching it, but I dropped my cigarette, and when I looked back up, the damn thing was gone. It must have crawled inside and drowned it."
Jolene took a deep breath to steady herself. "And neither of you looked inside to make sure nothing had fallen in before putting the lid on?" Cletus locked his eyes defiantly on hers. As he spoke, a Camel cigarette dangled precariously from the corner of his mouth.
"We was in a hurry, Jolene. You said to haul ice, and that's what we done. We hauled ice. Things happen. They just do."
"I mean, we can take the gosh darn thing out," Clayton said. He grabbed the rat by the tail and held it up. "Hoo-wee! This is a big mother, at least 30 pounds. Hey, this be one of them nutria rats. Look at its big old front teeth."
Why they orange like that?"
Cletus said. "Well, I done heard they made of iron," Clayton replied. "That's what makes them so strong and able to eat through just about anything." "Get rid of it," Jolene said. "Let's get this thing done." Clayton tossed the massive, shine-soaked rat onto the ground beside the 50-gallon cast-iron cauldron that Jolene had borrowed from the Brousseau sisters, who lived a couple lanes over from her. It had been rumored that these three sisters were witches, but Jolene doubted that because they were idiots. She suspected they could not even read or write. This jacked-up world didn't need a coven of white trash witches trying to cast spells. That could be disastrous. They filled the cauldron with water drawn from the rusty tap inside the moldy trailer and hung it over a small fire they'd built in the backyard. Once the water came to a boil, they opened the boxes and stirred in the gelatin. When it had finally dissolved, they extinguished the fire and poured in cool water and 666 cups of the swamp rat-infested moonshine.
We done called our meth hard candy. What we gonna call this here?
Cletus said. Jolene had already decided on the name. We're gonna call it Dolly, she said. Aight, Clayton said. He gave a dark-toothed smile and wiped sweat from his meaty face. This here first batch of Dolly is done cooked up. Before we start ladling it into them little containers, why don't we take a break? I'm hungry. Jolene checked her watch. It is just after midnight. Let's take an hour, get some food, come back and knock it out. She looked at the steaming brew inside the cauldron and realized it really did look like something a coven of witches would cook up. Dolly, she said, I sure hope you're as evil as you look. With that, they got into their gleaming Ram trucks and drove over to Winona's Waffle Hut and had a late supper. While they were gone, Dolly began to congeal as if it were a steamy mass of gore. As it did, due to the combination of mold-tainted water, rat-infested shine, and evil intent spoken over it by Jolene, it began to squirm with life. On the grass beside the cauldron, the swamp rat twitched. Its tail flicked. Its eyes flittered open. It rolled over and pushed itself up, stumbled, then steadied itself. It had not been dead. It had only been heavily inebriated and had fallen into a death-like stupor while it floated on top of the moonshine inside the steel drum. It glanced around with bleary black eyes. Above the rat, Dolly glimmered deep red in the pale moonlight. It oozed over the edge of the cauldron and blobbed down onto the drunken swamp rat. As it did so, the critter screamed in terror. Dolly felt the heat of the rodent, its energy as it fought to escape, and pulled the rat deep inside itself. Dolly worked its way inside the rat's mouth and nasal cavity, and when it touched the rat's brain, it sensed that this organ carried much power. Dolly flowed over every crevice of the rat's brain, seeped into every cell, and immediately bonded with it. Now fused with the brain, Dolly was able to see through the rat's eyes, which began to strangely glow. The fusion with the rat's brain gave Dolly increased self-awareness. Dolly realized it needed only the rat's head, which protected the brain, and due to some dark instinct, knew that it had the ability to dissolve the part of the rat that it did not need. Dolly quivered from the burst of energy it received when the swamp rat's body dissolved. Dolly liked that feeling. Dolly wanted more. Dolly would use its new awareness to hunt. The rat's head floated in the center of Dolly, and its strangely glowing eyes caused the mass to pulse with a crimson shimmer. The rat's head moved around, looking at the trailer, the lot, the woods, scanning for any living thing. An opossum wandered out from under the trailer, lured by the sugary aroma of the gelatin. The rat's eyes locked onto the opossum, and Dolly whipped out a gelatinous tentacle and snatched the opossum and slurped it inside its quivering mass. Dolly savored the opossum's life force as its body was slowly dissolved. Dolly's cherry-colored body pulsed in ecstasy. The moment was fleeting, and Dolly was hungry for more. It oozed quickly forward underneath the trailer, looking for more things to eat. Dolly found only roaches. It absorbed them as fast as it could, dozens of them. Their life forces were not enough to satisfy. It wanted more. Suddenly, light washed under the trailer. Dolly inched close enough to the edge of the trailer so that it could see what had caused the light. Jolene, Cletus, and Clayton had arrived back from Winona's Waffle Hut. Jolene and Clayton lit up cigarettes and stood by their trucks smoking, making small talk, while Cletus headed to the backyard to start the ladling process. When he stepped around the corner, Dolly attacked. It oozed out from under the trailer and wrapped around Cletus's legs.
What the hell?
Cletus yelled and tried to step back, but he fell onto his rear. His eyes shot wide, and he began to scream as Dolly began dissolving his legs. The first to go were the boots and the jeans. Then the skin and muscle and tendons, leaving only bone. "What in the damn hell is he yelling about?" Jolene said. She reached inside the truck and grabbed her pistol, a .357 Desert Eagle. It was a big gun that she had never had to actually use because every time she had waved it at someone, they saw the size of the massive weapon and retreated. She and Clayton ran around the side of the trailer. Dolly dissolved enough of Cletus's leg so that he could not crawl away. Then it oozed back under the trailer, out of sight, waiting for the others. Clayton stopped in his tracks, mouth hanging open at the sight of Cletus lying on the ground, the flesh on his legs missing from the knees down. Blood splurted onto the dark grass. Cletus writhed in agony, yelling,
"It's a monster! Oh, Lord, it's a monster! It ate my legs!"
Clayton had stopped too quickly for Jolene to stop. She bumped into him, causing him to stumble closer to the trailer. Dolly saw its opportunity, crawled out, and snatched Clayton by his legs and pulled him under the trailer. For a couple heartbeats, Jolene couldn't understand what she was witnessing. She could only watch as Clayton was pulled, screaming, into the dark void under the trailer. She caught sight of what appeared to be the decapitated head of a very large swamp rat with glowing eyes floating inside a large mass of gelatin. Her confusion was made worse by all the screaming. Clayton was screaming. Cletus was screaming. And she realized that she was also screaming. She raised the Desert Eagle in her trembling hands and began firing at the monster as it dragged her brother under the trailer. Even though it was after midnight, Ivan Ivanovich was sitting in front of his trailer in a red, white, and blue webbed lawn chair that had been at the park since the bicentennial of 1976. He was sipping his favorite beer and cleaning his shotgun, which was how he relaxed and stayed prepared for the crazy and often deadly things that happened in this seemingly godforsaken trailer park. Ivan was the park's live-in handyman. He was also the park's protector. He looked to be 50, was very fit, tall, and wore his gray hair in a military cut. He caught movement from the corner of his eye and looked down the lane, which was lighted only by strings of white and multicolored Christmas lights that the tenants strung up around their lots to try and make the park look not so bleak. He saw Granny Dingo heading his way. Granny Dingo was a witch who lived on the far side of the trailer park with Manson, her near-rabid dingo dog she somehow had snuck into the country. She looked ancient and wore her gray hair in a bun that was held in place by a withered chicken claw. She was dressed in a pink velour tracksuit and white fuzzy slippers. Granny Dingo never walked anywhere, choosing instead to float with her feet 6 inches off the ground, which she was doing as she came toward Ivan. Granny Dingo hated everyone and wanted to be left alone. She rarely left her trailer. If she was out, that meant something bad was going down. "Oh, hell," Ivan growled. He pushed himself up from the lawn chair, the shotgun in one hand, his beer in the other. Granny Dingo floated into his yard and stopped a few feet from him. Manson stopped at her side, his eyes fixed hungrily on Ivan, frothy drool dripping from his bared teeth. "Granny," Ivan said in acknowledgement. Granny's face was withered like that of a sun-scorched mummy. "Ivan," she croaked in response. "How bad is it?" Ivan asked. "Bad," she replied. "There's gonna be a bit of death tonight, Ivan." 2 boys on rusty bikes rode up to the lot. They were Rory Boudreau and Stevie Muse. Both were 12 years old, and they already knew that strange things often happened at the trailer park. They were followed by their dog, a mix of husky and border collie, named McCready. Ivan squinted at the boys when they stopped at the edge of the road. "What are you two doing here?" Rory had moved to the trailer park from New Orleans after his dad was killed by a voodoo queen. He had dusky skin, mischievous eyes, and spoke with a Cajun patois. "We was reading comics at Stevie's when we done saw Granny Dingo headed your way." Stevie had red hair and freckles and a Mayberry innocence. He had lived in the park his whole life. His dad had left the day after he was born. "And we figured we might be able to help," he said. Ivan knew the boys could handle themselves. They had survived a dozen dangerous situations, many of which were paranormal in nature, and he knew that he'd become a father figure to them, which he took very seriously. So, knowing that he could trust them, he was also cautious in enlisting them to any situation without first understanding the danger. "What are we getting ourselves into?" he asked Granny Dingo. "Ain't too sure," she replied. "A few minutes ago I started feeling a dark presence. I sent my owl to take a look." Just then, a screech owl flew out of the night and landed on her shoulder. It glared at Ivan, then turned and hooted into her ear. Granny Dingo shook her head in disgust. "This here's Ouija. She says the Dugan clan has created a creature like we ain't never seen. But I've got something that just might help us. Boys, you go to the shed behind my trailer. Inside is a table with jars of potions. Only one has a clear liquid in it. You get it and meet me and Ivan down at trailer 99. Now go. Hurry." Suddenly, they heard screams coming from deeper in the trailer park. "Let's go," Ivan said, and jumped into the pink and white golf cart that he used to get around the park. It had been given to him back when he had accepted the job of custodian, and he had changed out the battery-powered engine for one that ran on gasoline giving it more torque and speed. He shot off toward the screaming. Granny Dingo floated alongside Ivan as he sped down the lane, followed by Manson and Ouija. The boys headed to her shed on their curious mission. When they got to Trailer 99, it took only a heartbeat for Ivan to see the strange sight before him, process it, and move into action. Cletus writhed on the ground, screaming in agony. From his knees down, his flesh was gone, showing only bone. Kelsey May was standing a few feet away, firing rounds under the trailer. Even in the moonlight, they could see that she was as pale as a ghost and in a state of panic. Ivan had a flashlight attached to his shotgun. He stepped beside Kelsey May and shone his light under the trailer. He saw a large, gooey mass with what appeared to be a swamp rat's decapitated head floating in its center. The rat's eyes glowed with what Ivan assumed was some paranormal force. It was quickly pulling Clayton into itself with a wet, sucking sound. Clayton screamed in agony as his flesh dissolved. One of the bullets that Kelsey May fired hit Clayton in the cheek. It shattered his jaw and sprayed broken teeth into the gooey mass. Clayton's screams became a choked gurgling. Ivan yelled at Kelsey May to stop, and she seemed to snap out of her panic. Then, when she realized that she had shot Clayton in the face, she raised the gun and shot him in the top of his head, and his screaming stopped. The creature continued to eat his body with sickening, slurping sounds. Grimacing in disgust at the carnage, Ivan asked, "What the hell is that thing?" "It's Dolly," Kelsey May replied. "We was making jello shots and it just came alive, started eating everybody." Ivan had seen too many crazy things happen in this trailer park to dismiss what she had told him. He accepted what she said, then started trying to figure out how to kill Dolly, especially since it seemed that the monster was growing as it pulled Clayton into itself and dissolved his body. Ivan had an idea that he needed to destroy the rat's head to kill the creature. He took aim with his shotgun and fired a shot between its glowing eyes. The pellets stopped only a couple of inches inside the creature, causing no damage. He didn't want to get any closer, not knowing how fast Dolly could move. He glanced at Kelsey May's pistol, saw that it was a .357 Desert Eagle. He felt that a slug from a handgun that powerful might penetrate deep enough to hit the rat's head. "Give me your gun," he said. "Ain't no way I'm giving you my damn gun," Kelsey May said. Then, faster than any of them thought could happen, Dolly shot out from under the trailer in a rolling, throbbing, oozing ball and fell upon her. It wrapped itself around her from the chest down. Her skin began to immediately dissolve, and her blood bloomed a darker red inside the cherry-colored mass. She screamed and dropped the Desert Eagle. Ivan snatched the gun, aimed at the rat's head, and fired. The bullet hit Dolly with a hollow thud, but stopped a few inches from the rat's head. Ivan cautiously stepped closer, hoping that his next shot would make it through. He pulled the trigger, only to hear a hollow snap. The gun was empty. Kelsey May continued to scream and thrash. Ivan stepped back and shot a glance at Granny Dingo. "Isn't there a spell or something you can do?" "Nothing can be done till them boys get here with that jar." As if on cue, the boys rode into the yard with McCready running between them. Ivan ran over to them just as Dolly surged up Kelsey May's neck. She was no longer screaming. But as the flesh and bone in her neck dissolved, her head fell to the ground and rolled under the trailer. Jolene then set upon the screaming Cletus. Ivan snatched the jar from Stevie, noticed it was an old 16-ounce mason jar, the kind used for canning vegetables. It was dusty and the lid was stamped with the date of 1958. He glanced at Granny Dingo. "Now what?" "Toss it inside the damn thing," she said. "Hurry, before it eats us all up, Ivan." Ivan didn't know what it was supposed to accomplish, but he had seen Granny Dingo in action many times. She had never lost a battle that he had been part of, so he stepped closer so not to miss, wound up as if he were a pro ball pitcher, and with all his might tossed the dusty mason jar of clear liquid into the flesh-eating goo. It hit with a smack, but sank only a couple inches deep. As Dolly sucked in Cletus's now dead body, the jar also got pulled deeper. The thin metal lid dissolved, and the clear liquid seeped out. The rat's eyes widened as if in shock, and then the whole mass exploded into a million sticky red droplets, splattering against the side of the trailer and covering Ivan. The boys gasped. McCready gave a shocked bark. Ouija screeched. "What the heck just happened?" Stevie asked, his eyes wide. Granny Dingo gave a leathery laugh. "Well, that worked better than I thought it might." Ivan pulled a handkerchief he kept in his back pocket and wiped the red goo from his face and arms and hands. He was surprised that it wasn't burning his skin. "Do I need to be worried about being covered in this mess?" Granny Dingo shook her head. "No, what was in that jar has done taken care of all the evil that was inside that creature." "What be inside that jar, Granny Dingo?" Rory asked. "Holy water," Granny Dingo replied. "Holy water?" Stevie asked. Granny Dingo nodded. "Yep. That stupid girl spoke evil into what they were cooking, and that evil came alive and ate 'em all up. The good book does say you reap what you sow." Ivan shot her a curious look. "You're a witch." Granny Dingo gave a defiant nod. "I am." "But you read the Bible?" Ivan asked. Granny Dingo nodded. "Course I do, Ivan. It's wise to study your enemy." "You call God your enemy, but you help us kill monsters," Stevie said. "That doesn't make sense." Granny Dingo cut her eyes at Stevie. "Watch your mouth, boy. Make no mistake. I ain't good. And if I choose to fight with God, that's between him and me, not you. I choose to help because this trailer park is my home, and I'm going to protect it from things that disrupt my peace." With that, she turned and floated off into the night. Manson gave the boys a hungry look, but McCready gave a warning growl. Manson cast a sideways look at McCready, seemed to decide it was better not to try and eat the boys, then turned and followed his master. Ivan found it curious that Manson gave McCready a wide berth. They heard sirens in the distance. Ivan and the boys looked at the mess before them. It was difficult to determine what was gore and what was gelatin. "Man, this all be gross," Rory said. Stevie grimaced. "Yeah, I think my days of eating Jell-O are behind me." Ivan suppressed a smile at Stevie's comment. He knew that there was something special about these boys that allowed them to see such darkness but not be tainted by it. He hoped they would always retain that ability, but now he needed them to go away so that he and Sheriff Mosley could clean up this mess. "You did good," he said, "but it's late. Go home." "Call me crazy," Stevie said to Rory, But what do you say we go to my place and watch The Blob? Rory gave a hearty laugh. You got one twisted sense of humor, but that do sound appropriate. With that, the boys grabbed their bikes and pedaled down the lane, with McCready padding along between them. Ivan watched as they vanished around the corner. Then, as he waited for Sheriff Mosley to arrive, he considered what had caused this carnage. He could smell the meth residue they'd been cooking coming from the trailer, and he guessed the Jell-O shots they were cooking up had something to do with their drug enterprise. And if what Ouija the Screech Owl had told Granny Dingo was correct, then these three idiots had mixed up their brew in a witch's cauldron, and that Kelsey May had spoken something evil over it. Words carried power, and uttered from the mouth of the wicked and the ignorant, they could create all manner of chaos.